Let's talk about one day, just a single 18-hour window in America. But what if during that short time, dozens of major emergencies exploded all across the country, seemingly all at once? What happens when you start connecting those dots? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into.
The date we're zeroing in on is January 27th, 2026. And look, this isn't a story about one single thing happening. It's about how one day saw this incredible surge of crises, literally from coast to coast.
So, the first alerts start to trickle in. You hear about a man shot up in North Seattle. Then, boom, all the way across the country in Philadelphia, there's a home invasion shooting.
And at the same time, an officer-involved shooting erupts down in Phoenix.
Portland Dispatch is getting absolutely swamped with calls for theft and assault.
And then in Maple Grove, Minnesota, you've got hundreds of protesters clashing with police. And believe me, that was just a tiny fraction of what was going on.
So what in the world was happening on this day? Were these all just random, isolated incidents? Or was there something bigger going on here? Let's unpack it.
Okay, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll get the big picture. Then, we'll zoom in on the protests and the police response. After that, we'll look at the huge spike in violent crime, see how our cities were straining under the pressure, and finally, we'll try to connect all the dots.
So, what we're really looking at here is a completely unusual number of really serious incidents. And these are all compiled from police scanner alerts and news reports, all crammed into just one 18-hour period. It's a lot.
Let's kick things off with a major flashpoint of social tension that really blew up in Maple Grove, Minnesota.
Things escalated there, and they escalated fast. You had hundreds of anti-ICE activists gathering outside a hotel. Pretty soon, police declared it an unlawful assembly, and they used pepper balls to break up the crowd. It all ended with more than a dozen people arrested.
You know, the official statement from the police really highlights that classic tension you always see in these situations, right? It's that constant push and pull between the right to protest and the need to maintain public safety. This one incident, just on its own, was a huge sign of the social pressures bubbling right to the surface that day.
But here's the thing. It wasn't just protests. Not even close. The day was also marked by a truly shocking wave of violent crime.
And the scope of this is just staggering. We're talking more than 11 cities reporting serious shootings or stabbings, all in that same 18-hour window. This wasn't a regional problem, this was a national event.
For instance, in Fayetteville, North Carolina, a horrific act of domestic violence left 3 members of the same family dead.
Then you jump over to North Philadelphia, where a violent home invasion left 1 man dead and 3 others wounded after they were shot inside a house.
Meanwhile, in Frederick, Maryland, there was a mass stabbing in the early morning. 1 person died, and several others ended up in the hospital.
And out in Phoenix, a simple fight escalated until it turned into an officer-involved shooting, pulling law enforcement into yet another violent situation.
So think about this. On top of all the protests and all the violent crime, cities were also getting hammered by a constant barrage of other emergencies. It was pushing first responders to their absolute breaking point.
And the sheer variety of crises was just immense. I mean, while police were handling protests and violence, fire departments were out battling huge structure fires in LA, Rochester, and Queens. A police chase in Las Vegas turned deadly. A homicide investigation kicked off in Washington state after a body was found. And in places like Portland, dispatchers were just drowning in a nonstop flood of calls for everything you can imagine. The whole system was teetering on the edge.
Okay, so we've seen the chaos. We've seen the protests, the violence, the emergencies popping up everywhere. Now let's just take a step back and try to make some sense of what this one day in America might actually be telling us.
When you organize the chaos like this, some pretty clear themes start to emerge. The protests and clashes, they point to some deep, simmering social tensions. That huge wave of shootings and stabbings, it reveals this powerful undercurrent of widespread violence. And the constant barrage of other emergencies, well, that highlights the incredible strain on our law enforcement and city services all across the country. See, these aren't separate stories, they're all connected. Each emergency pulls resources away from another one, creating this dangerous domino effect, where one crisis just makes the next one even worse.
Which really leaves us with one final and pretty crucial question. Was January 27th, 2026 just a random, chaotic day, a statistical blip on the radar? Or was this 18-hour snapshot actually a symptom of much deeper fractures in our society, and maybe, just maybe, a sign of what's to come.